California gets more rainfall than Israel, boasts a coastline 5 times as long, and sits atop billions in tech wealth, so why is it Israel, a desert nation, that engineered water abundance while California's farmers watch fields turn to dust? Israel recycles nearly 90% of its water. California manages barely a quarter. If both are modern and coastal, why can one build a surplus while the other barely manages shortages? The story begins with a system designed for a century that has long since vanished. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, has become a stark indicator of California's water reality. Its surface has dropped to historic lows, exposing a white mineral ring along the canyon walls, a visible reminder of just how much water has vanished. In 2022, the lake's elevation fell below 1,045 feet, the lowest point since the reservoir was filled in the 1930s. This decline is not a fluke. It is the result of years of overallocation, prolonged drought, and rising temperatures across the Colorado River Basin. Every spring, NASA satellites capture the shrinking blue pool, the receding shoreline, and the expanding stretches of cracked mud. The water that remains must be rationed among millions of people, sprawling cities, and vast agricultural lands across the Southwest. For California, the boom and bust cycle of wet and dry years means that even a single missed winter can send reservoirs like Mead into freefall. When the big storms do come, the system often cannot capture enough to refill what has been lost. The result is a supply that swings wildly from full to empty, with little buffer against the next dry spell. As Lake Mead drops, water managers scramble to cut deliveries and enforce restrictions, but these emergency measures only buy time. The reservoir's decline lays bare a deeper fragility. California's water storage system was built for a climate that no longer exists. Beneath the surface of California's farmland, a quieter emergency has been unfolding. As rivers and reservoirs run low, farmers and towns turn to the vast underground aquifers that once seemed limitless. Decades of heavy pumping have pushed these hidden reserves beyond their natural limits. In the San Joaquin Valley, satellite data and ground surveys reveal entire stretches of land sinking, sometimes by more than 1 foot each year. This land sinking is not just a statistic. It warps canals, cracks roads, and damages the very infrastructure meant to deliver water. The ground itself compresses as water is withdrawn faster than it can be replaced, and the lost storage space can never be regained. California responded with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA, passed in 2014. This law requires the state's most overdrafted basins to balance their books by 2040. For many regions, that means cutting back on pumping, fallowing fields, and finding new ways to recharge depleted aquifers. But the deadline is drawing closer, and the scale of the challenge is immense. USGS and the Department of Water Resources maps show broad swaths of the Central Valley marked by persistent subsidence, evidence that the old approach of treating groundwater as an emergency reserve has run out of road. The invisible crisis below ground now threatens California's future supply, making engineered solutions not just a policy debate, but a necessity. Israel's water engineers faced a landscape where nature offered little margin for error. Rainfall was sparse, aquifers were shrinking, and the Sea of Galilee hovered near ecological collapse. The answer came from the Mediterranean, not as a hope, but as a calculated project, turned seawater into a dependable daily supply. Along the coast, a chain of reverse osmosis plants began to rise, each one transforming salt water into drinking water at massive scale. The flagship Sorek 1 started operation in 2013. At full capacity, it produces about 624,000 cubic meters per day, enough to supply roughly 20% of Israel's municipal demand from a single site. Inside Sorek, seawater is pushed at high pressure through long banks of specialized membranes. Salt and impurities are left behind. Only pure water passes through. Energy recovery devices built directly into the system capture much of the pressure from the waste brine and recycle it, cutting power needs by nearly half compared to older designs. This efficiency is not just technical fine-tuning, it is the difference between an expensive gamble and a reliable, affordable supply. Sorek's output flows into the national water carrier, blending seamlessly with other sources and reaching taps across the country. What was once an emergency backup is now the backbone of Israel's water security. Today, more than 80% of Israel's domestic water comes from desalination, and the network keeps expanding. The sea has become Israel's largest, most reliable reservoir, engineered, measured, and managed as a matter of national survival. In Israel, wastewater is not just a byproduct, it is a resource, captured and reused at a scale unmatched anywhere else in the world. Nearly 90% of Israel's treated wastewater is recycled, most of it routed directly to farms. The heart of this system sits just south of Tel Aviv, the Shafdan treatment facility. Every year, Shafdan processes between 130 million and 140 million cubic meters of sewage, transforming what once flowed to the sea into water clean enough for crops. The process does not end with filtration. Treated water is sent through vast fields of coastal sand where it percolates underground and undergoes further natural purification, a method known as soil aquifer treatment. From there, this reclaimed water is pumped south, irrigating fields in the Negev desert that would otherwise be barren. This circular approach turns every drop into a multiplier. While cities and homes use water once, the system gives it a second life in agriculture, freeing up precious fresh water for drinking and industry. Israel's recycling rate stands in stark contrast to California, where only about 23% of wastewater is currently reused. The gap represents millions of cubic meters lost each year, water that could help buffer against droughts and ease the strain on rivers and aquifers. If you want leaders to stop calling this impossible and start copying what already works, subscribe and comment. Would you drink purified recycled water if it met or exceeded standards? In the Negev desert, a farm manager unspools a line of tubing along a row of tomatoes. Each plant receives water drop by drop, just enough, right at the roots. This is the legacy of Netafim, founded in 1959 at Kibbutz Hatzarim, where Israeli engineers transformed irrigation from a gamble into a science. By delivering water directly to the soil, drip systems cut evaporation losses and prevent runoff, allowing crops to thrive on far less. Today, more than 3/4 of Israel's farmland relies on this method, paired with sensors and smart controls that adjust flow to match weather and plant demand. California's fields, by contrast, still include wide swaths watered by flooding or overhead sprinklers. Agriculture accounts for about 40% of the state's total water use, a share that turns every drought into an economic shock. In 2021, the tally reached $1.1 billion in direct losses for California's farms, with hundreds of thousands of acres left idle. The Israeli model goes further. Farms receive recycled water for irrigation, while the highest quality supply is reserved for drinking. This two-quality system squeezes more value from every drop, ensuring that cities and crops both have a future. Huntington Beach became the battleground for California's biggest desalination debate. For over 20 years, Poseidon Water pursued permits to build a seawater plant designed to deliver 50 million gallons a day, enough to supply hundreds of thousands of homes. The project journeyed through city councils, environmental reviews, and a maze of state agencies. Each round brought new requirements: advanced intake screens, brine diffusers, flood risk plans, and mitigation for marine life. Lawsuits and appeals stacked up, fueled by concerns over marine ecosystem damage, rising sea levels, and the prospect of higher water bills. In May 2022, the California Coastal Commission delivered its verdict. 12 commissioners voted unanimously to deny the permit. Their findings called out unavoidable harm to marine life from open ocean intakes, the risk of flooding as sea levels rise, and disproportionate impacts on nearby working-class neighborhoods. They also pointed to the high cost of desalinated water compared to cheaper alternatives like recycling and conservation. Despite decades of effort, the Huntington Beach project never broke ground. The decision sent a clear message. In California, even urgent water solutions can stall for a generation when regulatory hurdles, environmental protections, and local resistance collide. Today, California's water fate is a choice, not a mystery. While technology exists to close the gap, political will and public trust lag behind. As climate extremes accelerate, inaction costs more than change. The question now is not what is possible. It is how long we will wait to act. What is your answer?